Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Alex's Afternoon Art Show. Today we are drawing another Street Fighter character. We're drawing Karin in her alpha design specifically. And because it's a Street Fighter one, we're going to be talking about posing, as we usually do in the Street Fighter drawings. Because, I mean, there's various different, very unique poses that all the characters have, which it would just generally behoove the use of time to spend it on talking about posing. But yeah, I'm not sure a lot of this, what I'm going to do with some of this, because I've left a lot of space for myself in terms of background and stuff like this. I don't think I'm going to do anything quite so crazy as I did last time. But yeah, I think I will try and do something anyway, something interesting, because with all the Street Fighter ones I've done something reasonably interesting with the background, but I'll have to a think about it. So yeah, I will roll the intro and then I will show you what I have. So yeah. So, this is what we got. Now, I mentioned, again, we're going to be talking about posing. So, it's worth noting that posing, not always do you have to have the most dynamic or insane or acrobatic pose in the world in order for it to be an interesting pose. Sometimes, a challenge can be just in making a simple pose of a character standing dead middle of the page look interesting. So, something that's worth noting with a lot of Karen's posing is that a lot of it is very simple. A lot of it is hands, or she usually keeps her hands and her body in a lot of her poses, and so that is a thing which can be challenging to do a lot of the time in terms of poses, because it also, again, it leaves you a lot of room. It doesn't necessarily occupy a lot of page space, so it actually can be easy or difficult depending on your particular sensibilities. For example, typically I prefer to occupy more space with these sorts of things. So here it's a case of where I'm trying to sort of, I spread things out a little bit more. For example, her pose here, she's doing her sort of little laugh where she covers her mouth. But I tilted it a little bit so that there's a bit more of an interesting silhouette going on here, of where you can still see her full face, but you can still see that she's doing the laugh and covering her mouth, like that. Ordinarily she would have her head more turned, but I didn't go for that. Also, we're at a bit of an angle, so that would make things a little bit harder to see what's going on here. I have then the other hand on the hip, and slightly being concealed by the top. So yeah, and then when it comes down to the legs, she's sort of got a fairly standard just standing pose, just with the legs slightly apart. One leg is straight and one is slightly bent. More often than not, whenever you're doing a lot of standing poses, it's worth, again, I mention this all the time, but it's worth making things a little bit asymmetrical, have both hands doing something different, have both legs doing something different, just so that it stays interesting. It gives you something more to look at, gives you something more to see, really. Just that you're not just looking at something very basic. But yeah, as I mentioned, it can be challenging to simplify in terms of poses. So again, as I mentioned, a lot of her poses tend to be sort of hands in, body in, so that would be folded arms, hand on face, something like that. A lot of this stuff is very in, even in a lot of her fighting poses, her arms are in. So that can sort of, again, that's challenging in its own right. But yeah, so whenever you're doing a lot of these simpler poses, again, as I mentioned, the real sort of trick to making it look more interesting is to just have more things happening, more little things happening. For example, here, her head is slightly tilted, her hand is out, but it's also slightly at an angle, so we're seeing each of the fingers at a different sort of angle. The index fingers pointed more towards us, and then they're each sort of steadily pointing more away from us as they go along. The arm is bent inwards. That's a bit more challenging. It's a bit different. Again, it's not usually how you're going to pose an arm is inwards like this. You're not really going to pose the arm in. It's not. You don't often do that, anyways. I don't. But so it's a little bit different. It requires a little bit of different thinking. And then there's the other arm here, where it sort of overlaps a little bit with certain things. The sort of the shirt covers a little bit, and then There's the scarf, which I have specifically chosen to have falling down. I don't have it flaying out in any one direction, or again, the back of the scarf isn't flaying out. The hair is just sort of falling down normally. It's not sort of flying out in every direction or anything like this. Even though that would be more visually interesting, it's better in this instance to sort of keep it simpler. And then it's little things like, again, I decided to have the skirt billow a little bit because I just need to add a little bit of movement to this. Don't want it to be too stationary. You don't want it to look like you have a character sitting in a complete void of movement, of where there's nothing happening. Because in almost any space at all, there's going to be a little bit of movement. A little bit. At least something to make things look a bit more interesting. And so here I decided to have just the skirt move a little bit, just because it's just something going on. It also makes it look more like, again, if the skirt was just flat straight down, it would look like she's been standing there for a good minute or two. But the fact that it's sort of billowing a little bit means that it looks like she's almost walked into this pose, or that she's even still in the process of walking into it. So there's something a bit more going on there visually at that point. And it's just things like that that add a lot when it comes down to posing. It's very useful just to sort of think of it that way. Of sometimes simple does still work. Things don't have to be complicated. You can keep things simple, and that will maintain a certain level of complexity in its own right, because it requires a lot of skill to make things look simple and effective. Because even when something is very simple, rare is it that it was ever actually simple to make. There's a lot of artists who have very, very simple art styles, but they can still do a lot with those art styles. And it's not to say that because they're simple, they're not detailed. Sounds like a contradiction, but whenever you see certain artists with very simple art styles, they can still get a lot of expression and tone out of very little. And you can do a lot with very little. So this is the thing, that's something which is just sort of worth keeping in mind. Whenever you do sort of simpler things, it's worth noting that you're not limiting yourself by doing simple. Simple does not mean limited. Simple can mean more creative. You can get far more creative with simple stuff than you can with overly detailed stuff. Because if you're getting far too detailed, then it can be very difficult to sort of maintain. If you're very detailed, when you do certain less detailed things, it can stand out and look odd. And maintaining consistency is more challenging in more detailed art. But in simpler art, consistency is much more manageable, but then it's the other stuff where you're going to be spending your time. The stuff you really want to be spending your time on is more of what you're doing. And so here, I've chosen to go for something a little bit simpler. If only for the fact that the last one was so complicated. But in theory, this one shouldn't be too challenging. I should just be able to get through it. There's a few little details which I might have to adjust. I feel like the top is maybe a little short. Karin is normally, in terms of design, obviously very much opposed to Sakura in that sense, where things like Sakura's top is short, where Karin's top is a little longer. It tends to sit a little lower. And then vice versa, Karin's skirt is a little shorter, but she then has the shorts underneath, and I think the shorts need to be a little longer. I think I need to bring them down like just a tiny little bit, because I feel like the edge of the skirt and the shorts shouldn't really be that close together. They're like almost touching. So yeah, I feel like that shouldn't be too close. There's the gloves, there's the shoes, all that stuff. The shoes are very simple. There's not much to them. Yeah. So I think mostly we've got what we need. I expected the hair to be much harder to draw than it actually was. You can cut a lot of corners on this sort of thing. In this instance, I just drew a tube, and whenever I'm going through with the details, I will just sort of be fraying the edge a little bit more, so that it's not quite so harshly defined a shape, because it doesn't really look quite right the way that it is now. It resembles what it should, but it's just, again, it needs a little bit more detailing to it to sort of sell it. And again, subtle detailing. We don't need to go too crazy here. Subtle detailing will do us fine. But yeah. I don't think there's anything else I really need to cover. I might need to trim in the top a little bit because it's going to make her look a little bit bulkier than she actually is. I might need to trim in the sort of tops of the sleeves and stuff like this as well. Because yeah, some of these things are a little too bulky. Like I mean, the sort of the uniform itself is boxy, is sort of the way that it's designed. But I feel like I need to trim in a few bits of it, just so that it's a little bit less, a little bit more form-fitting, I suppose. Is what I want to go for, something a little bit trimmer. I think at the front here it needs to be trimmed in a little bit and then lower. It needs to, yeah, I think it needs to come in and then lower. I think it's mostly what I need to go for here. I think the skirt is actually fine. Maybe a tiny bit longer in certain aspects, and then make the shorts a bit longer as well. I think that's all we're really missing. Yeah, I think we're good to go, probably. Good to start. The face will likely change a little bit, it always does. Rare is it that a face remains the same from base sketch to a detailed sketch. From the base lines to the detailed lines. In my instance, anyways, rare is it. Replicating a face is very challenging for me. I'm very bad at keeping them consistent, but features are how you do so. Anyways, I don't want to start rambling about that, but the general idea of what I'm saying there is, yeah, stick to certain features, maintain certain consistency of features. With me, the one I try to maintain consistent is the eyes, because that's what you see first. So the human eye will always gravitate towards what it can perceive as eyes. So you need to sort of, I mean, in my experience, I find it more worthwhile to maintain consistency of the eyes. So, anyways, I will do these details and then I'll be back to do the colors. So yeah. Alright, it is now multiple days later, and we have the details done. It only took the one sitting to get them done, but you know, here we are. We're multiple days later, and now it's time to do the colors. So, colors, fairly simple. Again, I didn't do anything too crazy with the details. I may as well go in and just have a little peek at things. I made the top a little longer. I didn't change anything really with much else of the design, really. I sort of just refined the shape of the edge of the skirt and stuff like this, and I sort of I tried to sort of tighten up certain bits of detailing on the face. For example, I wanted to sort of flatten the edge of the eye a little bit, so that it's more of a sort of a smile. So again, it's more of like a happy expression. Like whenever you have more of a happy expression, your eyes sort of flatten a little bit. Again, it's hard to demonstrate, but yeah, it's hard to demonstrate whenever I have a fairly unexpressive face. But yeah, it's the type of thing where whenever you sort of bring up your mouth like that and then you're smiling, it sort of flattens the edge of the eye there, as opposed to whenever, again, it's very subtle in reality, but these are things that you emphasize whenever you're drawing. But yeah, it's not the most important thing in the world, but it's a little detail that I like. But yeah, I decided to sort of flatten the edge of the eyes and stuff like that. Also, we're at a lower angle. The head is tilted away from us, so we're seeing the head from a lower angle. Therefore, certain things should look flatter, i.e. the underneath of the eye, the top of the eye should seem more rounded. Same way that if you're seeing from a higher angle, the top edge of the eye should seem flatter and the bottom edge should seem rounder. These are little things that you can do to sort of just emphasize your little bits of perspective. The hair drills, I sort of, the hair tubes, I'd say would be more accurate. I sort of gave them a little more, less of a defined edge and stuff like that. Just little simple things to sort of clean them up. But yeah, is there anything else I really did? No, I made the shorts a little longer, but that's about it. Otherwise, everything's about as it was. And I trimmed in the sleeves a little bit, just so that doesn't make her look so broad at the top. But yeah, in terms of the colors, we also have to do the background. And in terms of a background, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. With all the Street Fighter drawings, they tend to do something more so paint-wise. With a background, they tend to do more sort of an effects-based background. So I'll have to think about some of the colors I'm going to use for that. I think I'm probably going to use an orangey color. I want it to sort of be bright and not so uniform in terms of color palette. So it needs to have red, it needs to probably have orange, maybe yellow, but maybe I could sort of intersperse a blue in there into the background colors, because amongst her colors it's predominantly red, white, yellow and blue. Those are sort of her colors. So I can maybe see what I can do in terms of spreading that out into the background. So yeah, red, white, yellow and blue. I can have a think about that. I can maybe work that into the background in some way. We'll see what I manage. But yeah, anyways, I will do these colors and then I'll be back to do painted shading. That's what it is. Anyways. Alright, so that is our colors done. Simple enough, easy enough colors. Just bright, vivid. Keep it simple, keep it very bright. That's generally what I've been doing with the Street Fighter colors. And I also did the background, which what I decided to do was to try and incorporate all the different colors that I wanted to do in the background in my mind. I used 3 different competing smokes, and then some sort of splash brushes to mix them in a little bit more, and then the white in the middle to just sort of disperse a little bit and clean things up a tiny bit. But it's messy and I'm fine with that, so we'll live. In terms of what our color grade later is going to be, I'm going to have to mix in some blue somewhere in there now, because a substantial part of our background is also blue, along with the accent of blue on the character. So I will have to think about that. I think what I might do is I might have my lightest color for the shading be a sort of a maybe bluey toned color, and then the darkest color will be maybe red toned, something like that, so that they don't fight too much in that sense. That might work well enough, but one of these 3 primary colors in the background is getting muted, that's for sure, and it's probably yellow. So we will see what happens. I will try my best to balance these 3 colors, but that's not really what happens whenever you've got 3 primary colors to worry about. So anyways, I've got to do the painted shading, and so that's where things are going to start getting a bit more equalized. So yeah, as I say, I'll probably go for sort of reddy toned darks, and then bluier toned lights, and so I'll probably stick with that into the detailed shading as well. This shouldn't take too much longer to finish, so we will see. Let's try and get it done. Okay, painted shading, and then I'll be back. So yeah. Alright, that's our painted shading done. As I mentioned, a little bit of purple, i.e. a little reddy toned purple, and then a sort of a pale blue. Very pale, just so that it's not so overpowering on things. It acts more as white than really anything else. But there's a slight blue tinge to everything on the lighter side now, so again, that's sort of what we want. That'll give us room to use our blue as a lighter color anyways. Within our color grades in our gradient map at the end, that'll give us some room for that sort of stuff. So it shouldn't be too, off color. It shouldn't really, it shouldn't be too aggressive a color correction. So we'll see how it works anyways. So I will do these the detailed shading, and then I'll be back to finish up in terms of the gradient maps and all that stuff. So I'll do the light line on the first gradient map as well, then I'll be back. So yeah. Alright, that is our detailed shading, light line, and first gradient map done. So, what I did with the gradient map is that it starts from a purpley tone, then into a reddy tone, then into an orange/brown tone, then into a yellow tone, and it gets progressively paler as it goes along. up to then we get our little bit of blue at the end, where it's just a tinge. It's mostly kind of a white shade. It's not really all that blue. It's whitish, but it's bluish as well. And yeah, that just gives us a little bit of a gradient there, and again that obviously sort of blends with what we already have, so it enhances the sort of colors without muting anything too much. The yellow does get a tiny bit muted, if only from the fact that it just gets a bit brighter. That's the only thing that really happens to the yellow. The edges of the blue get a little bit muted, but otherwise it is all still fairly present, which is good. That's what we want. So yeah, alright, it's time to move on. Let's start making our other gradient maps. So I will also need a luminosity. Do I want this to be under or over? Under and over. Let's turn it down so I can try to see what I'm doing here a little bit more. It's supposed to make things a lot brighter. Not normally what the luminosity does. Let's turn it down to 15%. And put it under everything. Makes it a tiny bit darker, I think. Yeah, it's just a bit darker there. Okay, and now let's make another duplicate of that. Put it at the top. Make it a color burn. Let's have a look at the different ways that this sits. Above everything is bright, middle is dark, bottom is dark. Go at the top, and then turn it down to 10%. Maybe even a tiny bit lower. 5%. It's enough where we can still see that it's doing something, but not enough where it's just overdoing it. So we've got a very intense one here, surprisingly. So usually the gradient maps typically aren't that intense these days, I often find. So it's surprising that it's sitting quite that strongly. Let's grab my texture. And there we are. Now let's stretch that over everything. And set it to overlay. Yeah, that's very bright. Let's maybe only make it 10%. We have to leave it at 10% because the lighter colors are affecting things so strongly here that things are just getting blown out massively. Like, I mean, it's pretty bright there, but it gets very blown out once it gets to this sort of level. So yeah, how does this look on the screen in front of me? It's not quite as blown out here. Let me zoom in and have a look. Yeah, it's not quite as blown out on the screen in front of me. It's just below me here on the tablet screen. It's very blown out. But yeah, it's the colors are a bit much in certain ways, I think. But I'm not going to change it now. I've kind of committed to this idea by this point. It's more of it'd be more work than it'd be worth to fix it. But granted, I don't think it really needs fixed. I think it's fine. I'm pretty happy with this one. I'm pretty happy. The background is maybe a little bit messy. Yeah, if I were to maybe say some issues which I'd have with this is that the background's a little bit much. In some respects, there's a little bit too much going on, and the yeah, there's a little bit, maybe a little bit too much going on in the background, and yeah, the colors are just a little blown out. That's sort of a double issue of the gradient maps being very bright, and also the just the general colors themselves being very vivid. So that's sort of where our problems come from there. Ultimately, though, I don't think it's too much of an issue. It just looks very different than what I would ordinarily have gone for, and even maybe what I was intending to go for. So yeah, yeah, that's fine. I'm happy with it. I'm content with that, anyways. Yeah, no, this was a reasonably fun one. It was certainly easier than the last one. The last one was very challenging. It was very, very hard. The last one. Probably could have gotten this done in one sitting. I didn't need to split it, but oh well, I split it, and that makes my life easier. So, well, anyways. Yeah. I sort of lost the train of thought a little bit in terms of what I was actually doing with this, by virtue of it being split across multiple days. I would say that we talked plenty about whatever the topic was. I believe it was posing, and I'm pretty sure I talked quite a bit about that at the start of the video. I don't really know, to be honest with you. I might have only talked about it for 5 seconds. My memory of the last session of recording of this is not good. I have no memory, basically, of it. So, yeah, well... Anyways, I'm content, I think, to leave it there. Yeah, this was an enjoyable one, at least. So, I suppose I'll roll the, I don't need to roll an intro, I have to say the outro. So yeah, I will do my outro and then I will leave you. So, if you liked the video, do whatever it is that you'd normally do, whether that be liking it or not. I would of course prefer if you liked it, but I can't make you do that, so all I can do is politely suggest it, which I believe I have done. It's the same deal. If you want to subscribe, go for it. I'm not going to stop you. I would encourage it, as a matter of fact, but you don't have to do that. You really don't. If you have a suggestion for what you'd like to see me draw in the future, you could leave a comment, politely worded, or just don't do it at all. If you're not going to be polite about it, don't do it. And yeah, if you choose to watch the next video, I will see you next time. So with all that said, that is us. I'll say goodbye and I will leave you. So, bye-bye.